Hi, everyone. Welcome to Tech Talk, a podcast where Amit and I talk about various technology related topics. Today, we're going to talk about ports. Now, ports are something that all of you, I would imagine, would be familiar with. We use ports, different kind of ports every day. In fact, if you're watching us right now in your computer, you are absolutely using ports to connect with your screen, or at least you're powering your computer. And even if you're watching this on your phone, or watching or listening on your phone, you have used a port to charge your phone. So absolutely, very familiar topic to talk about. But while familiar, a lot of the times we don't think about the variety and the technological diversity that goes behind a particular topic. And that's what we want to explore today, all the different kinds of ports there are, the purpose they have, and the way some of them work, and give you guys a general idea about what's happening behind the scenes when you're using it, without thinking about it. It's good to be aware. It's interesting to know, and it's also fun to talk about. So yeah, let's start. What's your thought on ports, Amit?
So I think when I mentioned this topic to you, Rinat, I actually wrote about it in my newsletter. And the reason I wanted to talk about this subject is my wife recently bought a laptop, and it's a Dell XPS 15 inch, and that laptop had three USB-C ports. And I was thinking, okay, how do you connect a mouse? How do I connect a hard disk? Or how do I connect even a monitor? And that made me think, and then I did some research, and then I thought, okay, wow, it's not as simple as just, okay, you buy a monitor and you connect. And there has been a lot of progression over the period of years to come to this standard. And recently, EU has passed a law asking all the companies to make sure that they use only USB-C ports for charging any device. Okay, so that got me thinking, and then I thought, okay, let's talk about these ports. But I think in today's topic, let's explore the hardware ports rather than software ports. So, just for the benefit of everyone, uh, we are going to talk to you about computer ports or ports that are available on your laptop or a desktop machine, but those are physical ports. Now, every computer also runs an operating system, and those operating system allows different software ports, and those ports are pre-allocated or used by applications. So suppose you have a browser always connects on port 8080 or port 8080. So that's very common for browsers to talk on a software port. So it means a browser is using that port to communicate outside to the outside world. And similarly, there are different ports for different applications. Some are standardized. So for a certain type of mail application, certain type of VPN applications, you use standard ports, and those are pre-allocated. But for other applications, like for a torrent application where you want to download a very big file, say the Linux operating system, which is about 20 gigabytes or maybe even 5 gigabytes, and you want to download that, for the uTorrents or for the BitTorrent protocol, you can use any random port. So, but it has to talk on that port to connect to the server and then download. So that's software ports, but today's topic is all about hardware ports. Ports that you use regularly, but it has changed so much over the last decades that it's unrecognizable now. And it made me think, and when I did my research, I was like so amazed, like where we are currently. So that's why I wanted to explore this topic with Renat today.
Absolutely. I mean, it is amazing the transition it went through. I mean, it was such a hassle before. When I don't know, some of you might remember, the old days of mobile phone when you had different charging ports for all the different kinds of phone. Like Nokia had one, Samsung had a different one, BlackBerry had a different one, and and to charge you needed a port, but then to connect your phone to your computer you needed a different cable, and that was even more more of a hassle. But that's just one place where standardization have brought us, made our lives easier. But then again, Amit, I think you're going to touch upon it today about even in computers and monitors and all the other computer peripherals, how they have, how it has been, a lot more easier with standardization of ports. And different ports have different benefits, and how do those ports work? And we see the two ends of the ports when we use them, but what's actually going inside, how many wires, and what are each of their tasks, and what are their purpose? These are very interesting, and yeah, let's explore that now.
So yeah, so Renat, absolutely. I think a lot has changed, and there has been a drastic change in the way we have standardized things, especially on smartphones. When we started, as you said, there was different port for charging, different port for connecting it to the computer or your laptop, and now it has been standardized. So most of the phones on the in the Android world are now coming with a USB-C. So USB-C is a type of port that uses the USB standard. It follows the USB standards. And that port is used for both data transfer as well as charging. And you can connect external devices, by the way, on your what do you say, on your smartphone. Like if you want to transfer photos from your smartphone to a USB, you can actually connect the USB with a OTG connector, and you can then directly transfer from your phone to the USB without actually going through the computer. So that's quite handy.
And also, just on this topic as well, one of the other cool things your recent phones can do, I don't know if iPhone can or can't, but I know Android definitely can, is that if you have a USB dongle for your mouse and keyboard, you can put that connected to your phone and use mouse and keyboard as if it's a computer. And then, there will be a mouse appearing on your phone screen, and you'll type with a full-size keyboard. It's very cool, and a lot of the times very convenient when you're trying to write a lot of things and you don't have access to a monitor or a desktop computer. I mean, even if you have connection to a monitor, you can actually connect your phone so you can see your whole phone screen on your on a monitor, and use your keyboard and mouse, and it's just a computer. So you're kind of carrying around a full desktop computer capability in your pocket. It's something very cool to.
Absolutely, and I think that idea. I mean, it's very. I mean, it's good for a smartphone, but it's a different level when you start using a tablet. And I think
Mhm.
tablet is where this has become very popular, where you want to use a mouse and a keyboard, and you dock it, and then you start using it, and it's crazy. So yeah, so that's where you can use. So, and one of the reasons, so why this is happening, I mean, let's explore why there is a standardization of ports. Things are becoming faster and things are becoming slimmer. So, I want to make things less bulky. I also want to make things less compact, I mean, more compact. And in order for me to do that, I need to reduce as much physical space as possible. Now, if I connect a round connector for a charging cable, a USB port for data transfer, a mic, a 3.5 audio jack for connecting a headphone. I have three different types of ports already on my smartphone. How do I reduce the size? So the physical size has to be reduced, and that can only be possible if we try to standardize everything through a single port. If you have a single port that's used for charging, for data transfer, for connecting devices, for everything, then it just makes our life easier. And that is why the standardization has happened, and that is the reason why things are going in that direction. And smartphones are actually heading to a portless world where they will not have any charging cable. Um, Apple has already stopped shipping their chargers with their phones, and some of the other Android manufacturers have already stopped shipping a charger with a phone. The idea is that you already have a charger, so reuse it. But in the future, because wireless charging is coming, and maybe we can talk about it in some other in some other talk, but because of wireless charging, and once it becomes very powerful and efficient, you no longer need a physical charger to charge your device. You use wireless charging. That's the future. So it means your phone will become even slimmer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you think about the amount of space that's been saved after, like not having separate data cable, power cable, and audio cable, it's quite significant. And not just phone, even in laptops nowadays, people want slimmer and lighter laptop. And the more real estate you can make available for any of these portable devices, laptop, phone, etc., the better. But not just this, even in desktop computing, right? I mean, the sight of cable, I don't think anyone likes a lot of unorganized cable here and there. And organizing it is possible, but it's still something. If there was no cable to see or to organize, I think lives would be a lot easier, and people would appreciate that a lot more. And that's where we're hopefully heading. But at the same time, there is the challenge of the data transfer speed. As you mentioned, even for power, right? I mean, the future is wireless charging. Yeah, that's all good and fine, but the fast charging that I have in my current phone, an hour and 40 minutes, and it's full 100% charge. And in first 10 minutes, I get like 30% charge from 0 to 30%. Is that possible in wireless charging? I don't know. Or will it become possible in future? That's something I guess we're gonna watch that space and find out.
Yeah, I think yeah, in terms of when it comes to wireless charging, it's still very slow. But when it comes to speed charging over the phone, like my current Android phone, I have a OnePlus 9 Pro, and that phone can get charged from 0 to 100 in about 30 minutes, full charge.
Wow.
So it's
Okay.
very fast, and some phones they can charge under 20 minutes. There are superchargers, but you have to use the chargers that come with the phone, and that's one of the selling points for buying these phones that you can quickly charge your phone. But let's move away from smartphones and let's come to computers because that's where we started with.
Yeah, let's
So
let's let's talk about different types of ports and what they.
yeah, so when we talk about computer ports, so initially we didn't have, I mean, there was laptops, but when we think about computers, we always think about a desktop. We have a CPU, we have a monitor, we have a keyboard, we have a mouse. So those are the standard things that you need. And inside your CPU, you'll have your motherboard, you'll have your graphics card, you'll have your hard disk, you'll have the memory, so you'll have everything. And I think we did a talk about it. Maybe we'll share that with this talk, and we'll put a link to that talk where we talked about the different how to assemble your own computer and what to think about. But these are all the things that are there inside the CPU. And now you want to connect your keyboard to the computer. So there is a port. Earlier there used to be PS1 port. Okay, it's a serial port. I think parallel serial. I can't remember the exact name, but it's PS1. And then if you want to connect a mouse, you use a similar port. They are different colors, and they are
Sounds right.
round connectors with pins, round connectors with pin. Every connector has a male and a female version. The male version is stripped off and the female version is an enclosure. So the male version goes inside the female version. So that's the normal connector specification. So whenever you try to connect, there is a male version and a female version. So female versions are normally where you want to connect, and male version is on devices where you want to connect it to something. So like a pen drive, I want to connect it to a computer. So the pen drive will have a male connector and the computer will have a female connector. And similarly, the keyboard will have a male connector and the CPU will have a female connector. So that's the type of connector that we use. So PS1 connector, and these are wired keyboards. We don't have Bluetooth yet. These are old times. So we have PS1 connectors for mouse and keyboard. Then we have the 3.5 mm jack to connect our headphone or a speaker. So we can get a 3.5 mm, 3.1 channel or 4.1, 5.1 channel speakers. So with speakers and subwoofers, and you can connect that to your 3.5 mm jack, and you can get audio. Then you have the VGA ports. So VGA ports were used for connecting the CRT cathode ray tube monitors that were originally built, and they were used to connect to the computer. So you had a VGA port. It changed to DVI, so the data transfer increased, and then as we went along, we got better monitors, slimmer monitors, and then the connectors changed. So VGA, DVI, and then you want to connect your internet. So you have an Ethernet port. So that Ethernet port is where you connect your LAN cable to the router. So that will give you the internet connection. Then what else is left? And I think you will have a power. So the CPU itself will have a power delivery, and that power delivery a CPU normally will consume a lot of power because it's powering all your motherboard, RAM, hard disk, etc. So it consumes a lot of power, maybe 100, 200 watts at that time. Currently, CPUs consume about 850 to 1000 watts, depending upon what graphics card you have and what kind of processor you have. So those things will need a port for delivering power to the CPU. And yeah, so those are all the different types of ports. Plus, you will have a USB port, but later on. So those are the different types of ports that you could now see, and these are physical ports that you can see. You can connect devices and different types, and there is a different port for connecting a printer as well. Okay, so
LPT1, I remember, because
LPT1, yes.
printer used to go, like, it was so difficult to get a printer to work. I think even now, like Printer Connect or this and that, and there used to be, like, in Windows 95 or 98, there used to be like a pop-up that please check the LPT1 port. And I was really young at the time, but that just stuck with me, the name
Yes.
of the port. Yeah.
So LPT1 port for the printer. As we move ahead, the keyboard and mouse they became a USB. So the USB that we are familiar with is USB A. So that's the USB A port. That's the standard port that's now been very popular. Any USB device, if you want to connect a keyboard or a mouse or even a pen drive, that will have a USB A port, and that you use to connect to your computer. So you get rid of PS1 ports and you have USB ports to connect keyboard and mouse. But you still have now, when we started, we had analog monitors. Now we have digital monitors. So those monitors needed high data transfer in terms of video. Now 1 second of video has 30 frames, and each frame, depending upon the pixel size, will have a lot of data. So suppose you have a video which is length say 20 seconds. 20 each second has 30 frames, so 20 seconds is about 600 frames. 600 frames with that image. So if each image is 5 MB, 600 into 5, that's 300 MB. 600 into 5, that 3000 MB or 3 gigabyte of data transferred in 20 seconds. That's a lot of data.
That's
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 why.
that's massive, yeah.
So that's why you need a different type of port. I am just simplifying it. Of course, there are compression algorithms and there are many other things, and maybe I'm not doing the math right, but that's why we need a separate port for connecting the monitor. We normally don't use a USB uh, port to connect a monitor to our computer. Not when the era that I'm talking about, when we moved the keyboard and mouse to this type of connector, and the monitors moved to HDMI display port. So those are the two main popular ports that became very popular. DVI was there, but majority it was HDMI or display port. Display port is the most recent one. So that was for the monitor, and then for the power it was still the same. But on laptop you had different ports. So the laptop connectors again a round one, and those were very popular. And every manufacturer, say Lenovo, Dell, Apple, they had their own different charging cable. So if you change from one laptop to another, you have to buy. You'll get the charging adapter, but then it means you have to keep maintaining so many different charging adapters, and then you need different types of ports. And Ethernet port is still standard; it's still not changed. As we move along, the USB Type A port, now we also get Type B ports. So Type B ports allows monitors to talk to laptops, and then you can plug in devices to your monitor. So I have a Type B port in my computer, and what I do is I connect my monitor to my laptop. My monitor can now, and on my monitor I can connect a mouse, I can connect my headphone, I can connect my keyboard to my monitor. But that, because that monitor is connected to the computer, i can I can basically talk or use my keyboard as if it's connected to my computer, but actually I'm using the ports behind my monitor. So the monitor that I have, it's a 24-inch Dell monitor, and that has about 6 USB ports. So I can connect 6 devices, but I need to use just one port to connect the monitor to the to my laptop. So I use one port on my laptop, but I get 6 extra ports from my monitor. So that makes life easy. So that's type B. And then you had in USB type A and type B, you had micro and mini, and those were used for your smartphones. So the micro A, micro B, those were used for smartphones and portable hard disk. So those were using different types of connectors. Now, why different types of connectors for them and not for this? These devices, when you connect, remember you are transferring. So let's say you're connecting the portable hard disk to your computer. When you connect, there are two things happening. One, you need to deliver power to your portable hard disk so it turns on and it can write data. And the second thing is you're transferring data e- either ways. So from the hard disk to your laptop or from your laptop to your hard disk. So there is bidirectional data transfer. So you need one one port for data transfer and one port for power delivery. Of course, it's low power because it's not a very big device. So it needs low power. And that's why the shape would have two different the connector will have two parts. One is a thin one and one is a thick one. Sorry, a wider one, narrow one and a wider one, both with the same thickness. And they used to go inside the hard disk. But on the other side, it's a USB Type A. So basically, with a Type A, connect any device on the other end.
Yeah, the whole family of USB is, it has a lot of branches, right? So there's, micro USB, there's mini USB, there is, I think, there is another one in the middle as well. And then you mentioned that, which is USB, type A. And then there is USB-C that we are recently seeing. And even in the regular USB that has become like so popular over, the past few years, that we even had memes about, always trying 2-3 times to for it to go through. And USB-C kind of solves that problem because it would go both ways. But yeah, USB, by the way, USB stands for Universal Serial Bus. So the bus connection, so bus is basically a way to say the bandwidth of each of these the connections not ports. The bus is the bandwidth of each of the wires that are being connected. And serial bus, you'll see in a normal USB that if you look inside the port, that you'll see four sort of golden or silver sort of wires that are being connected, and those are in serial. So I think that's why it's called Universal Serial Bus. And it's actually, I mean, to be honest, another thing to also look at is the mechanics behind the mechanical design of each of these ports, because that's something, I mean, being a past mechanical engineer, I actually have some knowledge on this. That when a port is designed, a lot of things are actually taken into account, in terms of the actual physical design of it. And USB was so popular because it could, the enclosure it had. I mean, you have to think about, it's being used, on a regular day-to-day basis. It's, going through a lot of rough use by a lot of people. Not everyone, but it should be able to withstand a certain level of, rough use. And USB was a design which was actually quite strong, and it doesn't, break down so easily. I mean, I think a lot of the times you'll see Apple's Lightning ports and other ones, they do tear very easily, but USB ones, for because of a good design, it's actually very good. And also, you could actually the square, the metal enclosure, if you get rid of it, you can still have a USB device with just the four wires coming out of it, and still use it as a connection device, connection port. So that also enables even slimmer design of various sort of devices. So when someone is designing a port, they are also taking into account not only the bidirectional data transfer or power transfer, but also how sturdy it will be in years of use, if it is used roughly. And then nowadays, they also have to think about whether it can be somewhat waterproof as well, because phones are becoming waterproof, but they're not waterproof when they're charging, because it's quite dangerous. But sometimes you might want to connect not power delivery, but data transfer. And it's good to have in a like a moist or a humid environment. It's good to have that kind of safety. So that's something also they need to take into account. And these are the things that they do think about when designing ports. And yeah, that's another thing to know about. A lot of sort of mechanics or design, mechanical design go into a design environment.
I think, yeah, Renat, I think you explained it really well. I actually didn't think about the wear and tear, but you're absolutely right. Because a USB port is used so many times, you plug in and plug out devices so frequently that it has to withstand the wear and tear of like thousand or maybe a million plugging in and plugging out for any device. So yeah, the port is quite resilient. At over the period of time, I've been using my laptop for it's a 2014 laptop, so it's almost 8 years old, and I'm still using it. And I keep connecting and disconnecting the USB cable, and it still works like a charm. So yes, you're right. And yes, the strips that you can see on the USB pin that is there inside, you can actually, if you connect wires, you can actually talk to any other device if you can't plug it in. So that's again one way which Rinat mentioned, which is quite useful. And yes, again, Rinat mentioned about the waterproof, and I think most of the smartphones they have this IP rating, IP68, so that's waterproof. So if you say drop a phone in a swimming pool, your phone will withstand. On YouTube, you can watch a lot of videos where people actually dip it in a mug or a tub or even sometimes in a swimming pool. I know people who have taken underwater photographs with their iPhones and Samsung devices. So yeah, so you can actually, the ports that are coming now on smartphones, they are so good that you can actually shoot a photo inside the water without water getting inside the phone. So the port has to be resilient to that as well. So yeah, I think a lot of consideration has to be made. And USB, the so let's move on. I'll come back to the connectors because I wanted to finish because there are so many other different types of ports as well. So we covered USB Type A and Type B, then we covered HDMI, and then we covered DisplayPort. So DisplayPort is an open standard, so anyone can use if they want to. Of course, they need to get certified, and same with HDMI. HDMI is though a closed standard, and you need to get certified. So as we move ahead, so that's for monitor and that's for data transfer and that's for power delivery. We still have not yet reached. We can power devices, but very small devices. So like a pen drive, like a portable hard disk, etc. You still can't power a full laptop with a particular cable. So then we come with Type C, and as you might have noticed, I'm talking more about a USB. So let's see why. Because it's universal, as Rinad mentioned, universal serial bus. So we come to Type C port. Now Type C is reversible. It means you can connect the mail any direction, up or down, and it will still fit inside like a lightning. So lightning connector from Apple is also reversible, so you can connect either side and it will always fit in. But the problem with Lightning port is that it only works with Apple devices. It's not available on any other devices because it's a proprietary port and a connector. But USB is open. So it means anyone who wants to use, they get the certification and they can start using it. The reason they need to get certification is they have to meet certain criterias in order to tell the customer what is the data transfer that they can support or what is the power delivery if they want to support anything. So with USB-C, what happened is the data transfer and the power delivery could be delivered through a single port. But there is a catch. USB-C also comes with different versions. So you might have heard USB 3, USB 2, USB 3.1, USB 4 is coming now. What is this? How is that different from USB-C? And that's where the catch is. So that's the USB, and then slowly Intel came up in collaboration with Apple with their own type of port called Thunderbolt. Now Thunderbolt, in a Thunderbolt port, if you have the right connector, you can connect two 4K monitors. Thunderbolt 4, you can connect two 4K monitors through a single port. Imagine the amount of data that's being transferred through one single port, and you can also do power delivery. So
So
USB. Yeah, go ahead.
A quick side note on this: the Thunderbolt port, I think, is a closed port, as you said. HDMI is also closed. So the difference between open and closed is that, if a company, usually a company, not just a person, who spent money on research and development and developed some of these ports, they patent it. So it becomes closed, as if like no other small manufacturing company, if they wants to, they can't just start manufacturing HDMI or Thunderbolt ports, even if they know exact all the specification on how to, etc. But they can't. But Thunderbolt, I think, is very closed because they're not easy to get permission to manufacture either. But in case of HDMI, I think the patent owner sort of just asks for 1 cent or something very minimal for every HDMI port that is being manufactured. So that brings them quite a hefty sum, I think, every month or a year. But yeah, that is something that you have to pay as to the patent owner. Very, very little for one port, but yeah, 1 cent or something like that. But every HDMI port you are using, for example, know that the patent owner is getting a little bit of it. And yeah, I mean, if it was an open port, and open ports are better. It's like open source softwares, right? I mean, it's better because it's cheaper, but also if it's approved by everyone, if it's popular, that means that it works very well as well. So that's the difference between open and closed, as you were mentioning.
Well, thanks, Renat. I didn't know about that. I mean, I knew it was closed, but I didn't know that it's because of patent, but it makes sense. Because yes, it's proprietary, so you need to meet certain standards. So because Thunderbolt is proprietary, because it's owned by Microsoft now, Apple, I'm not sure if Apple is currently involved, but it was involved in the initial stages. They have to meet certain strict criterias before they can actually put the Thunderbolt symbol, which is a lightning symbol, on the laptop or on a desktop. So yeah, so now we have come from USB to Thunderbolt. So now we can give power to a laptop using a single port. We can connect monitor through that port, and we can connect any other physical device through that port. Funny thing. So now let's see what's happening. We talked about the different types of ports, but you keep hearing about USB 3, USB 4, Thunderbolt 3, Thunderbolt 4, DisplayPort 1, HDMI 2.1. What are these? These are standards. What we talked about, type A, type B, type C, they are type of connectors, how you connect the device, and they are different shapes. Okay, so the shape decides what you can connect to, how you will connect. But the standard decides what is the speed it can operate, what is the data transfer it can operate, what is the power delivery, if it supports, can it operate, or etc. Okay, so the standards dictate that. Now USB-C is a type of connector. Over that connector, you can do power delivery, data transfer, connect a monitor. How? Because, but if the USB-C port has USB say 2.0, which is a lower version, then the data transfer is limited. The current data transfer on USB 4 is 40 gigabits per second. On USB 3.2, 3.1, 3.0, 2.0, and 1.1, 1.0, it's lower. It goes down. So the speeds go
Yeah,
down as we go down the versions.
to remember it's gigabits per second, so not.
Gigabits. Yeah, I said
Yeah,
gigabits.
no,
Yes.
you did say it correctly. I'm just like,
Yes,
reiterating.
true.
Bits and bytes have 8 times the difference. So
Exactly. Eight bits equal to 1 byte. So normally, when you see a capital B, that's bytes. If you see a small b, B for Bravo, if you see a small b, that's bits.
mm,
So 40 gigabits per second. So USB Type C standard, but it could be USB 3.0, USB 3.2, USB 2.0. We don't know. Okay. So you have to check. It doesn't mean that, okay, you have got a Type C connector, so it means the data transfer will be fast. No, it's not that. So they have different colors. So the USB, at least Type A, will have different colors: blue color, black color, white color. So that color indicates which standard it's following, and that tells you what is the maximum speed it can operate.
I
So
think USB 3.2 is red, just from memory. But yeah, I mean, another quick hack to understand. I mean, I'm talking about the not the USB-C, but the regular USB that is, very common everywhere. So in that port, you would, as you know, that some of them are made for data transfer as well as power delivery, and some of them just do power delivery and no data transfer, and some of them just do um, um, data transfer, no power delivery, even if you wanted to. So how would you find it? It's not always written and it's not always clear to, USB ports, they all look the same. How would you know? So if you look through inside the square enclosure, you will see four lines, which are the four sort of the silver or golden strips, which basically is basically doing all the transfer data or power, whatever. So if you see all four of them, then it is doing data and on both ends. So both ends of the cable, you see all four exists. That means they're doing data and power. But in some of them, you'll see only three. That means they're not doing either one of them. They might just be powering or might just be doing data transfer, because one of them that is missing is basically for either data or power. Now, it's difficult to tell which one. Is it the third one or the second one? Because from whichever side you count, it could be the second or third one. So it's just a hack sometimes I use to, whenever I'm buying something, like a cable or a hub, I want to make sure that it has all four lines inside.
absolutely, and I think yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll mention link on how to read those lines because that's a very useful hack because
Yes.
it's actually not very clear. I mean, what can it be used for, and etc. But I want to make one thing. I mean, I want to clarify something, and that is that when we talk about power delivery, we talk about high power delivery. USB port itself supports power, but very low power. So the keyboard and the mouse they use very low power because they don't need very high power to operate. So USB, when you connect a pen drive, that pen drive needs power to write the data on it. So it does support power, but very minimum power. When I talk about power delivery, that's powering the whole laptop. A laptop needs a very high amount of power. So when I want to connect power, when I want to give laptop a power through a USB-C port, that port should support power delivery about say 150 200 watts so that we can power the laptop. So that's what I meant by power delivery. But
Yeah, so this is actually a good place to also, sorry to interrupt you, Amit. So this is actually a good place to also explore this whole thing about, power delivery, difference between power delivery and data transfer. And it also comes back to the difference between electric or electronic device. I mean, so, everything is, electricity. Without electricity, we don't have any of these computing devices working. Now, I mean, and you've also heard about, like, the everything in computer is binary, everything is 0 and 1. But how does 0 and 1 make you see this video? I mean, that this video doesn't look like 0 and 1. So what is actually happening here? What is happening is through these cables, data is being transferred in a way that if a very tiny little burst of electrons, electricity, is sent through the cable, and if it is received, that means the computer received, the binary value 1. And then if it's not, the next in the next second or next split second, then it's 0. And that's how it's communicating between it. Now, these electricities that are being sent and received, they're so minute that even if you touch it, you won't get an electric shock or anything. And they're happening like not thousands but million times, in a very short period, like a second, etc. Now that's for data transfer. But when there is power delivery, that's a analog or digital power delivery. That's like a actual voltage that are going through, and you might actually get a bit of shock. With laptops, you won't probably, it won't be dangerous. No, I mean, still don't do it, but it might not be fatal. But in some cases, in a high-powered devices to power it, it could even be fatal. So yeah, be very careful with that. But the point I'm trying to make is the data transfer is still electricity, but it's the voltage or the amperage of this is uh, like minute compared to the power delivery. And that's the difference between an electric device and an electronic device as well. Electronic devices has these electrons sent and received and given these binary values in these ways. An electric device doesn't have any of these smartness. It just powers something, and then for example, a regular kettle to heat up water, that's an electric device. But then nowadays there is smart kettle with Wi-Fi and everything that would have an electronic part in it, as well as the power, which is the electric side of things. So that's another quick side note to understand when we're talking about power delivery and data transfer.
Well, that was quite useful. I learned something new today. I mean, I've read about electric and electronics, but I think you've explained it quite well. Because I remember one of my lecturers in college, they asked me this question and I was not able to answer this. But I think now it makes more sense and now I can explain it to anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So the main thing to remember is electronic is to do with electrons. So it's so small burst of electricity that actual electrons are being counted and not counted. And electric device is just electricity in general. Like that's on a macro level, on a bigger level. So it's just electricity going or not going. So yeah, that's how I remember it. Electronics is to do with as small as electrons being measured, and the
Yeah,
other.
I think, and the reason I think the reason the electrons are considered, I mean, we have electronic devices is because they are doing some kind of computing, and the computers they are trying to calculate something using the zeros and ones. And of course, zeros and ones have certain protocols. How would a computer know that these zeros and ones mean this thing and these zeros and ones mean that thing? So there are certain parameters like the first 10 zeros and ones will be representing this, the next 10 zeros and ones will be representing that, and so on and so forth. So that's how the computers know whether it's video or audio, etc., etc. So yeah,
Yeah,
so it's
eight,
it's
the first eight, second eight, for example, it's 8-bit computing, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So I think that's where we go ahead. So now we have come down to the types of connectors. So USB type A, B, C is a type of connector, but it can have different versions of USB. Type C can have USB 3.2, it can have 3.4, sorry, 4, it can have USB 1.1. It's not supported on USB Type C, but just I'm giving an example. With HDMI, you have HDMI 2.0, 2.1, and the different standards. With Thunderbolt, initially it came with mini display port. So the display port itself can come in different formats. It can come in a standard display port, it can come with the mini display port, or it can come uh, in type C type of connector. So Thunderbolt used a mini display port initially, and then it changed to type C, and display port has also changed to type C now. Some monitors do support the big ones or the small ones, but display port is also now coming to type C. Now type C is the type of connector, and it's a standard USB type, but when it supports DisplayPort or when it supports Thunderbolt over the Type C connector, that's considered an alternate mode. So the USB-C port, when it's using the DisplayPort or the Thunderbolt protocol, it's considered as the alt mode to the standard specifications defined by the USB implementations forum. So USB IF, that's the governing body that decides what are the different standards. So USB 4, we are currently at 40 gigabits per second, and it's coming to USB 4 version 2, which is coming to 80 gigabits per second. Thunderbolt 4 is currently at 40 gigabits per second data transfer, and it is now coming Thunderbolt 5 80 gigabits per second. So USB 4 and Thunderbolt uh, are almost at the same thing, but both are using Type C connector.
That is very interesting and a lot of the times confusing for everyone to remember. I mean, for those of you who are very much into cabling or setting up various devices, it's kind of second nature to you guys and Amit and I as well. But yeah, I mean, I also know people who are very very well versed in all the virtual technical stuff, but they have very little. They get very confused with all the different types of ports there are. I mean, for example, the display port, the full size display port, and the HDMI cable is very, very similar looking. It just have one notch. It just doesn't have one notch in the display port, full size one. And you have to make sure that you have it in the right orientation, which is sometimes annoying, but sometimes confusing for a lot of us as well. So yeah, I mean, I suppose the way to sort of understand it better is just, I mean, the way I did it is just noticing, and but just noticing the shape and trying to remember the shape, and that just helps me. Not just shape as you just glance over it, but actually notice the shape. And for example, in a USB port, um a lot of people have this problem. They just try to put it in and it doesn't go in, and then they flip it and then it goes in. And a lot of people say that most of the times they have to flip it, but if you think about it, usually it's always facing one way. So in the square enclosure, there is a plastic on one half and the other half is empty. So the empty part usually is facing you. And so if you're putting it in a laptop, so I'm just going to double check. So the part that is empty, that actually goes on top. So in female connectors, they also have a plastic on one half, and in female connectors, it's on the plastic part is on top. So the empty part in your male connector is usually going to be on top. So if you do that, most of the times I just put it in the first try, because I've noticed it. So yeah, that's what I would suggest to our audience as well. That if you just notice not just the USB, but just the shape of all of these things, and they are not difficult to memorize. Or you're not like sitting down and memorizing it, but just notice it when you next time pick it up, and it will just become so much easier to remember.
Actually, that I mean, it's easy for me now to remember because I never paid this much attention and I didn't realize you paid this much attention. So I now know that, okay, Rinat pays a lot of attention to his sports. But I think that's quite useful because, yes, you're right. The female connectors, the empty part is normally on top. And for the male connectors, the empty part normally has to be on the bottom. So it's easy to connect. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's a useful tip and I'll keep that in mind. So yeah, so we have come now to different types of connectors. So those are the physical shape and then the different standards. And why has this occurred over this last few decades? The reason being that laptops are becoming much slimmer. Earlier, the laptops, as we mentioned with the smartphone, the same thing happened with laptops and desktops. Desktops are still not there yet, but they are also heading in that direction because a desktop you can connect even far more different types of devices. But with a laptop, because it has to be portable, it has to be lightweight, very efficient, and it has to be able to connect to a lot of devices, especially on the move. So you need to connect your smartphone, etc., etc. But laptops and smartphones, they you and even desktops now, you can connect devices using Bluetooth. Problem with Bluetooth is there is a latency, the amount of time it takes to get a response. Suppose you send something and if you don't receive it instantly, there is a delay. And that delay is called a latency, how much time it takes for something to respond back. If the latency is high, it means it takes a longer time. If the latency is low, it means it's quicker. So normally when you check the internet connection, the speed, they check for latency. When we talk about data transfer, we check the latency, etc., etc. Like from the time you start to the time it actually starts, there is a delay. So with Bluetooth devices, there is a slight latency. So sometimes you don't get instant feedback. That's why I use a wired headset. A lot of people might have noticed, but if not, the reason I use a wired headset is because if I use a Bluetooth headset, there might be slight delay with my audio in comparison to the video, and I don't want to risk it, especially because I'm in a situation. And I also use a wired headset because I get more clarity in terms of audio. So that's why with a wired headset, the latency is very low, so I can quickly, the video and not the audio are in sync. But if I try to use a Bluetooth device, maybe because of the latency, the audio might be out of sync. But with the latest standards of Bluetooth, so currently I think it's 5.1 or 5.2, the latencies are dropping. And you can connect multiple devices. So I can connect my Bluetooth headphone to my computer and my smartphone at the same time. And if I'm listening to an audio on my laptop, and if a phone rings, it will quickly switch to that, and I don't have to change the Bluetooth connection. So it's so incredible.
There is definitely a lot of advantages of not just Bluetooth but any wireless option. But then again, it's still not the same as, so I'm saying, speed or quality, if you like, as wired devices. I mean, even though I'm not wearing a headset, but I'm still using a wired system to record. My microphone, you can't see it; it's attached to the webcam, but it's still, then the webcam is attached, wiredly connected to the computer. And there is absolutely, yeah, we don't want to, we want to provide you guys with the highest quality of audio and video, so we opted for the wired solution. But yeah, I mean, there is no denying that there is, the wired ones are still the more reliable ones. But then obviously, then you have the less advantage of, the flexibility or freeness, right? I mean, you don't have to, I mean, back in the old days when you had, extra headset, and then it was wired connected with your phone, and then sometimes it would just, it would get caught up in a door handle or something, and it was annoying. That now all of those annoyances have disappeared with the advantage of this. So yeah, there is advantage and disadvantage on both. Now, another thing also, speaking of this, and part that we haven't mentioned, is the Ethernet cable, and the wireless router. Nowadays, obviously, we have wireless router in every home, and we connect wirelessly. But this is also another thing to think about. The speed and reliability of internet you'll get if you connect it through an Ethernet cable is actually not comparable to wireless router anymore. I mean, at the moment, I don't have any speed issues, but sometimes if there is, I would definitely consider connecting, with my desktop with an Ethernet cable. So the speed is definitely going to be, no one, it can't be questioned. Definitely would be good speed. So that's another thing. And coming back to Ethernet cable and Ethernet ports. So when we say Ethernet, we talk about the cable and the port together. But the cable has a standard, which is currently Cat 6, and it previously was Cat 5, and it's a data transfer rate is related to it. Now, what I've heard like 5-6 years ago, and obviously the situation have now changed. At that time, I was, in the factory, building these ports and then connecting to computers and stuff. So I've heard that after Cat 6, there's not going to be any more improvement, because the Cat 6 have, improved the data transfer rate to a degree that we would never need anything more than that. I don't know how true that is after now 5-6 years, or now that we have more of a clearer vision for the next 10 years. But yeah, that's how sort of improved Cat 6 was. And the port itself is, I think it's RJ45 is what it's called. And it's very interesting. The individual wires, there's I think 6 wires that goes from end to end, and then you can basically, RJ45 is it's probably the easiest one to assemble for a beginner. I mean, USB and all of that ones, it's difficult to play with, but RJ45, you can basically just open it up and then see the wires and how they're assembled in serial, and then play with it on 2 ends. And even if if they are assembled in serial in standard, the right colors in the right place. But if you change on one side and if you change on the other side, it would still work, because the serial will remain the same. So if you make the same changes, so these are some of the interesting things that you can play with, and then you can close it back up, and then it's working again. So Ethernet cable is another very common cable that I think everyone has a spare one in their electric cupboard. But yeah, that's another common port that we very often use.
I think you mentioned a very good thing that there is a data loss, or sorry, the speed loss, not data loss, speed loss when you are connected over Wi-Fi compared to connecting over the Ethernet cable. It's just like wireless and wired. So when you're connected to your router directly, that's the best speed you can get. And I have noticed, because my room is upstairs, my router is downstairs, and because my router is downstairs, I get a speed loss. So my speed is 500 Mbps connection, but I get about 250, 300 Mbps on a good day. I don't normally get 500 because there is so many walls. I'm on a different floor, etc., etc. So there is a loss, but I'm okay with it because 300 Mbps is still good speed. But yeah, if I was connected to my router, I would get like amazing speeds. And I think we should talk about Wi-Fi, because Wi-Fi itself has different standards as well, and it can be confusing. So maybe the next topic could be Wi-Fi, because we just talked about ports.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, again, just another side, not side note, but a note in terms of Wi-Fi. We think about it. We think about just the internet speed we are getting when we talk about router. But actually, you could use the router to do data transfer between devices that are in the same network. So it's a LAN, it's a local area network. So you're creating a network within your house, and all the devices that are connected with each other. For example, I used to have a NAS drive, which is a fancier hard drive, if you'd like, and that was connected to the router, and then I would access it in my desktop through the router. But now you would think that if it's doing through internet, it's going to be very slow. How would you watch 4K movies? But you could, because it's not actually the internet that's being used, but it's using the router's data transfer capacity. And within this network, I mean, if you could have 500 Mbps on internet, imagine how much data it can sort of distribute around the house with that capacity. So it is a sort of untapped resource. I think there could be done with it in every home. Like, for example, why connect my monitor to my desktop? Why not just monitor connects to the router and gets it from my desktop rather than having a cable connected
True.
to it. That's just a thought. I mean, I'm sure it's definitely technically possible. How practical it is something for one of our audiences to try out and let us know.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, yeah, network access storage is something that I was also exploring, because when you have a lot of photographs, and my wife has a different computer, I have a different computer, and we want to share photographs, I have to transfer it to a hard disk, and then I have to connect it to her hard disk, and then she transfers the photo. So that's a pain. But if you have one single hard disk, which you can access over the network, as Rinad mentioned, local area network or LAN, then it's easy because I just transfer all the photos there and she can connect and pick it up from there. So there is no physical plugging or unplugging of a device, and that makes life so much easier. So you can not just store photographs but important documents, etc., and it's accessible from any device that's connected to that network. So suppose your device is connected to the router and you are using a smartphone to connect to the router but using Wi-Fi, you can still talk to the device that's connected on wire. So I can talk to that hard disk using my smartphone, and maybe I can transfer some data, and that is the power. So that's NAS drive is called network access storage. So
Mhm.
basically use the network to access the storage instead of compute.
Yeah, we could probably have another episode on that, but yeah.
Exactly. I was looking at options for that as well, and I was almost about to buy it, but then my wife put some senses to my head, and she said, "You don't need it right now."
But no, it does definitely have benefits and
Yes, it
advantages. It
does. It does.
obviously have drawbacks as well, but yeah, definitely something
So
to.
the other thing that so let's come back to ports. So we talked about Thunderbolt and a display port, USB, HDMI. These are the like four standard ports, and then you have the Ethernet. Ethernet ports are more popular now on computers. They are no longer available on laptops. So if you buy a new very good laptop, most likely you will not get a Ethernet port until unless it's a business laptop. Business laptops normally come with a Ethernet port, but the travel laptops, ultra portables, the slim ones, they don't come. They come with 2 or 3 ports, and they are mostly USB-C ports. That USB-C, which is the physical port, can be used to deliver power to the laptop, can be used to transfer data from one device to another, so a laptop to hard disk. It can be used to connect to different monitors, 4K monitors. So one single port can do all those things, depending upon what port supports what, because not every port will
And
support
also
everything.
using a converter, you could also connect it to an Ethernet router as well. I mean,
Yes, yeah, yeah,
having
yeah. So you
that
can, but that's an additional thing. Like
yeah,
you can use a connector. So a connector is basically you'll have a male part that will connect to your laptop, and there will be a female part that will connect to other devices, but of a different port. So like a VGA or HDMI or Ethernet. So you can basically connect your router to your laptop through that connector. So now these all these standardizations are happening, but because we are having only USB Type C ports in most of the laptops now, it makes them very slim. So that's the advantage of having one single port that can do everything. Of course, because you have to connect so many different types of devices, you still need ports and you will run out of ports. So you will buy a connector, you will buy a dock, a USB dock, which has a lot of ports and you can connect multiple devices. But making a laptop so slim, I think that's the beauty of having so little ports. And with one port, if you can do power delivery, data transfer, and connect a video device, a video a video output, say like a monitor, then that's the icing on the cake. So I don't need different types of cables. I can use just one cable and I can connect multiple devices. So I don't have to search. I don't have to maintain different charges. I can just use one cable and I can charge everything. So that's where the future is. And EU government has passed a law recently that is making sure that um, no new smartphones are sold without a USB-C port. So basically, all the different types of charging cables that you're used to will become obsolete. It
absolutely.
will
And this
be
has
USB-C.
so many other benefits. It's convenient for you as a consumer, but also it would be less of a carbon footprint as well, because you only need one cable and you can just carry around that one cable or own just that one cable and forget about everything else. Not manufacturing all different 5, 10 different types of cable, buy them, save them, put them in your drawer and never touch them back, never look at it again. All of these things. It's much better for the environment to standardize all of these things, and it is possible. I mean, there is no technical limitation of it, and now it's also more enabling, as you mentioned, Amit. All three different types of purposes: power delivery, data transfer, video. Sort of streaming, etc. So yeah, let's hope more of this standardization comes through in future years.
Yeah, so I'm also now slowly trying to get rid of devices that are on old types, getting most of the connectors to Type C because Type C is what I use the most. I don't use Apple products, so I'm not concerned about Lightning port. But most of the Apple devices on the laptop and the desktop and the tablet side, they are mostly now USB Type C. It's only the iPhones that are still on Lightning port, and that will change from 2024 onwards because iPhone will have to adhere to the regulation and as a result of that, from I think iPhone 14 has just been announced, iPhone 15, maybe iPhone 15 or 16 will have Type C connectors. That's for sure. So yeah, so now all these things have happened. We have talked about the connectors, but what about the cables? So a lot of times people think that okay, it's just the connectors that have the standards, but no. Sometimes the cable that you're using, if it's not of the right specification, it cannot handle the data transfer that the port enables. So even though your port allows 40 gigabits per second of data transfer, just because you have an inferior cable that doesn't support that standard, you are still outputting at say 10 gigabits per second. So you're not utilizing the full potential of that port. So sometimes you need to check the standard which the cable follows as well. So suppose you want to use it for Thunderbolt 4, then you have to check whether the cable that you want to use follows that standard. So you have the type of connector and the standard that it follows. So the type decides what you connect, the standard decides what is the data transfer rate or what is the power delivery rate. Can you power deliver 240 watts, to your laptop to power it. So you need to make sure that your cable supports all that. So yeah, so those are some of the things that when we talk about ports, are something that you need to think about. The future is getting much more brighter because Type C is getting standardized, because it's an open standard. A lot of other companies are pushing for it, and because it's open, it means it gets adopted much quicker. It's widely adopted. So if in future, if you want to find a cable for your device, because it's open, a lot of people might be already using it, so you don't have to carry a cable. You can actually ask someone and they can lend you their own cable, and you can use that to charge your device or use it for data transfer. So yeah, so these ports are making our lives easier.
Absolutely agree, and hopefully the audience, you guys have had enjoyed this conversation. I thoroughly did. Hopefully you did too, Amit. And yeah, we look forward to getting feedback and connections from you guys. It's always nice to know about what you guys are thinking and potential topics that you want us to cover. So yeah, please do reach out. And yeah, so far it's been amazing, and I hope to see you guys again next week.
Yes, thank you. Thanks everyone. Bye.